Hello and welcome to today's webcast with Flexion Mobile, where CEO Jens Lauritsen and CFO Niklas Kurresar will present the report for the third quarter of 2023. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A. And with that said, I hand over the word to you, Jens.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here. Today, I'd like to welcome you to our Q3 quarterly report update. We have quite a few things to go through. I've got Niklas with me, our CFO, who will do a little bit of a deep dive into the financials for the quarter, but I will start with some quarterly highlights. Want to recap a little bit on our unique market position and why it's so strong. We've talked a little bit about the Digital Markets Act in the past. That is coming into full force early next year, so I want to go through that in a little bit more detail and depth. And then what's happening and after what our focus ahead is. Niklas will cover off the financials, and then we'll finish off with some Q&A at the end. So if we dive into the quarter then, well, I'm really pleased to say that we're back on growth. We had a slightly sluggish summer. The whole industry have struggled, I would say, during the first quarters this year. I had a little look at the numbers in Google Play. Our portfolio performance in Google Play was actually down 25%, and we are up 7% until October. So I think even though the market is down, we're performing well, and I'm very pleased with that. So this kind of rebound started late in the quarter. In terms of revenue, we're up 11% in September compared with last year, and October continues very, very well with strong momentum into Q4. We tend to measure this in US dollars because that's our main trading currency, and so we try to keep our reporting in constant currency to basically exclude any FX impact on our numbers. It's in the last year, I think it's fair to say that the British pound has been very volatile. Was very weak last year, which meant that it had a boosting effect on our GBP revenue last year, and this year it's been the opposite. So we like to look at it from a constant currency perspective in US dollars, which is the main trading currency. We also reported our October revenue, which was great. A massive increase, 26% year on year. But also, I want to mention that our EBITDA is also very, very strong going into October. Just to put that, the 500,000 pounds estimated EBITDA in October into context, for Q3 we did 700,000. So only in 1 month we're almost as much as the whole quarter, and that leaves us with an EBITDA margin of about 8% for October, which is really good to see, and it makes me very positive going into the end of the year. Talking a little bit about November, we've continued strongly, which is a really good sign, and we've actually set some weekly records here in November. So very good to see that strong momentum into Q4. So what is driving this strong momentum then? Well, we launched some big titles. They came in quite late in Q3, which is partly the reason why we're seeing such growth at the end of the quarter. So most of you will know that we launched the #1 grossing game in the world at the moment, Monopoly Go, which is breaking all sorts of records, and was actually announced, I think last week, that it's been the most successful game launch this year, breaking $1 billion on Google and Apple so far since launch, which is amazing. But it's not only Monopoly Go that's driving our growth. It's also Stumble Guys from the same publisher, which we launched in this quarter. But strong titles aside, they won't produce any numbers without distribution. So I want to really mention a few words about some of the channel initiatives we're working on. So here I specifically want to talk about Samsung and Xiaomi, the two biggest Android device manufacturers in the world. Samsung then, they have, since about a year, we've been working together with them on an initiative called Instant Play, which is basically a way for customers to be able to get into games easily without having to download the game and install it on the device. That will, when it's fully rolled out, it's still early days. When it's fully rolled out, it will be available on all Samsung phones worldwide, and we're very excited about that opportunity. Xiaomi, we talked a little bit about in the Q2 report, and the strong volume we're seeing. They are continuing to roll out in Western markets. In Q4, most of the European countries will be live, and we're preparing exciting roadmaps, launches together with Xiaomi. So that's a really good new addition to our distribution footprint. We have changed our focus a little bit on which type of games we're signing, what kind of deals we're doing. So they tend to be bigger titles, and I guess, you know, looking at Monopoly Go and the traction we see in the market since launching the #1 game in the world, our focus is squarely on those big deals, but they also tend to take a little bit longer. And some of these deals we're working on are being pushed into Q4 and Q1 next year. That's why we decided to revise our guidance for the year, which you will have seen earlier in this month. Also, I want to take a few minutes on our influencer marketing service through Audiensely, the company we acquired. We announced the big deal that they signed in the summer for the biggest YouTube show in the German-speaking markets. It's a show called 7 vs. Wild. That was signed in the summer. It's now actually going live on YouTube end of November, and Audiensely have done a fantastic job in signing up sponsorship, and that will have a good boost to our Q4 numbers. The numbers we've reported so far does not include any of that, so very positive to see that, and we'll be excited to see it going live in a couple of weeks' time. Then lastly, another thing which is important for us, and it's more strategic long-term nature, is our partnership with Digital Turbine. We announced the partnership end of March this year. Now we're taking the next step. I don't know if you followed Digital Turbine in the past, but their CEO, Bill Stone, in his last earnings call, announced the deepened relationship which they're embarking on with Flexion, which is really exciting. And what are we doing there? Well, first of all, what is Digital Turbine? They are a NASDAQ US listed company, a big company that's focusing on delivering games and apps, mainly through advertising on devices. Their software is installed on more than 800 million devices worldwide, and they work with US carriers, they work with device manufacturers around the world, Samsung and so on. So they have a massive distribution footprint, but what they don't have is games that we work on. So together we're focusing on bringing in new titles to their distribution platform. We're working on user acquisition initiatives and generally strategic stuff together with developers that will allow developers to make more money from their distribution. So bringing in new payments with higher margin, things like that are very important for the game developers in the market. Let me take a couple of minutes recapping on our unique and strong position in the market. I think it's important to go back and really paint the picture of where we are. So as I said, we're focusing more on the top segment of the market. So on the one side, you have the top 250 games in the world looking for a global growing audience of gamers, right? So traditionally, the big game developers have been acquiring those users through user acquisition, pointing them to Google and Apple. That method of acquiring users isn't really working so well anymore for a number of reasons. The main one being that privacy and tracking as there have been changes to tracking, particularly on iOS, which is the most profitable platform for developers still. So the user acquisition model is kind of broken on those two platforms. So what are they doing then? Well, need to find new ways of distributing their games. They need to find more profitable ways of finding these new users, because their return on ad spend has got worse and worse over the last 2 years. So they're looking for new distribution and looking for higher payout. And their Flexion are right in the middle with two services, distribution and influencer marketing, which address the issues that they will have when looking at alternative ways of taking their game to market. So the biggest problem they have is opportunity cost, because in the past it's been easy. You press the button, you acquire the user that you liked, and then that user has been taken to Google or Apple to download the game. That doesn't work anymore. So you need someone to help them reach this fragmented ecosystem, which is growing. When we started out, we said it was around 5%. Now it's probably more like 10, 15%. But as the market evolves and regulatory pressure on the big companies like Google and Apple is increasing, this market will open up, and I wouldn't be surprised if this market grows even further over the next couple of years. So it's a very important position we have in the market, and it's going to increase in its importance over the next few years. So we talked a little bit about the Digital Markets Act in the past, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about that, because it's super important and it's going to have an impact on the market, particularly the European market, but I expect the effect to be felt and kind of rolled out in other big markets like the US and also in Asia, some of the biggest games market in the world. So what's happening then? Well, the European Union decided to do something about the dominance of the big mega tech companies in the European market. So they defined something called gatekeepers, and there are now 6 gatekeepers, of which Google and Apple are probably the 2 biggest ones. And the reason why these gatekeepers are kind of identified as being a problem in the market is that they control the users' access to the internet. And since mobile is one of the most common ways of accessing the internet nowadays, and through games and apps, it was needed to do something about that. So what's happening next year, end of March, is that these platforms that Google and Apple provide, so the App Store and Google Play, need to be opened up. And the idea here is that game developers and app developers should be able to find more distribution, have more flexibility in their marketing, and so that basically bring in more competition in the distribution and marketing of games and apps. So our partners will obviously feel a very positive effect on this. with them being able to compete on more equal terms than Google and Apple. And this is, of course, good for game developers. So we're hoping to see more distribution coming out of this, higher payouts and so on. And that's great for us, because the more distribution, the more options the developer has to take that game to market, means that it's also a more fragmented marketplace where we have a bigger role to fill. So that's super exciting. I've mentioned I've highlighted two areas which I think are going to be mostly affected and relevant for us. It's the alternative store market, so more distribution, more app stores will be able to go on the slightly opened up platforms. And we have also something which is starting to happen, which is the what we call D2C marketing. So developers are chasing higher payouts. They can do that by using third-party payment platforms that pay out better than Google and Apple. So Google and Apple are today paying a developer 70% and keep 30% themselves. But if a game developer decides to market the game directly to the user through other means, direct distribution and so on, they may be able to keep a much higher part of that. And that's what we call D2C marketing. And we hope that the Digital Markets Act will facilitate and basically enable that kind of change in the market, which is needed. And for us, this is, of course, two super important areas. Marketing as well, of course, the influencer marketing side will come along as part of that. So all of this is good for us. And what are we doing focusing ahead then? Well, the number one thing for that's driving value for Flexion is signing top gaming clients. And we're making really good progress. This year, of course, signing the biggest game in the world really helps. It gives us more traction with some of the big game developers and publishers around the world. And it's not only for distribution, it's also on the marketing side. Having such a big success with the Audiensely and the 7 vs Wild is, of course, giving us a much stronger position in the market. We're looking at our portfolio. We have about 30 games or so on the distribution side. We're continuing to focus on replacing some of the lower performing games with better, stronger titles, and adding additional distribution to those games will really see revenues going up. So that's our continued focus. We've reached this point now where the company can really see strong contribution from new titles. And what I mean by that is we've kind of reached a critical mass on the cost side. So we're covering our cost, and every game we bring to the platform will contribute positively. Of course, it's bringing in more gross profit, but we're also starting to see a strong effect on growing EBITDA, which you'll see in the October numbers. That's what I talked about earlier. Digital Turbine is one of those initiatives that I mentioned, but there are others, and a lot of these strategic initiatives are coming as a result of the Digital Markets Act, which we're all preparing for, and we're not the only ones. There are many of the big distribution-focused companies that are looking at how they can take a stronger position thanks to the Digital Markets Act in Europe next year. So if we're looking at our position right now, we can start from a position of strength. We have strong cash balance, we have no debt, with free cash flows coming in, and we're seeing strong growing revenue and EBITDA over time. So we're in a very, very strong position going into Q4, and I'm really positive about next year as well, with the Digital Markets Act coming into place. And with that, I would like to hand over to Niklas, who will take a deeper dive into our Q3 financials.
Okay, thanks Jens for holding most of the presentation, which makes my life quite easy. So I'm only here to talk about a few finance slides, so let's dive directly into them. If we first look at the key KPI for the distribution division, which is the average number of revenue and the number of titles we have within the category top tier titles, we do see that we have reduced the average revenue over the last 2 quarters, which is driven by this slowdown in the gaming market, so to say. But we kept 8 games. But what we see now, and why I think Jens and also I are very excited about this, is what is the performance we now see in October onwards. So in October, and here I added the 2 new titles, which are still in ramp up. So technically, they shouldn't be here. But even with those 2 included, we increased the revenue from 540,000 per month on average in the September quarter to now 640. And why this is so important is, of course, if you look on the total revenue for these top tier titles on a monthly basis, we see that we jump from an average in this September quarter of 4.3 million now up to 6.4. So it's almost a 50% jump in revenue. And this is, of course, before we come into the end of November, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, and this super big December month. So really, really strong performance from us. If you look on Audiensely, they have clearly seen the same slowdown, and they are in even more directly into advertising. So they should probably have seen an even bigger reduction in revenue than what's seen. So they have, to be very frank, they performed really well here, and I'm pretty proud about these numbers given where the market is. So 15% reduction in revenue, gross profit, and where they kept their margin year over year, which is very good. And then, of course, they're coming now into this Q4 number, which are very important for them. But they also have this 7 vs. Wild project, which is the biggest online event in Germany, and where they go live now in end of this month. And here we have now said that we have 3 million pounds as a target for Q4, so a big contribution for this project into both Audiensely's revenues and group revenues. If we go on group revenues, we see that distribution is the same thing. Distribution revenues are down 20%. Influencer marketing is down 15%. So it's the same as we see in the 2 divisions. If we look at it over a little bit longer term, we do see that the performance is. This is with Flexion having a relatively weak or 2 weak quarters, but the numbers are still pretty decent long term. And I think quite many other companies in today's market will actually take these numbers. So Flexion are doing really well as a company. And here again, when we look at the October revenue, we see that October have 6.6 million pounds. So take that times 3, we're up at 20 million pounds. So we're back almost with October only at 20 million pounds. More or less the same as December 22. And then when we look at the guidance for the rest of the year, we see that the band is within 22 to 29. So on the lower end of it, we're above December, and with 29 million, I need to redo the graph because it's very high. So super, super strong Q4 here coming up. Group EBITDA is not that much to dwell about. It's the same thing. Gross profit is down according to the revenues. It's pretty straight, straight line relationship between the 2. Staff costs are flat. We are still investing for growth. We strongly believe we will grow the company, and of course we accommodate for that. And because EBITDA is in this kind of early stage almost, when gross profit goes down, EBITDA goes down. But also when opposite, if you start growing again, your EBITDA should mathematically shoot up quite significantly going forward. And again, longer term, here is 2-year numbers. And I think, You know, we coming here with 2 weak quarters, but the numbers are still looking pretty decent, to be honest, although it's early days on EBITDA. If you look at below EBITDA, it's not that much to dwell about because we acquired a company. There's quite a lot of things happening on IFRS technical accounting below. There is one thing I want to mention, and that is this other extraordinary cost. We have taken a write-down, a provision for a write-down for some of sales invoices related to our subsidiary Audiensely, because the customer who is in insolvency. That's £130,000, and there are some legal fees also included in that. But otherwise, it's nothing to really to talk about. And then finally, the audit. The 2022 audit is still ongoing. We get a lot of questions about this. We've been prevented to talk about it, unfortunately, but all I can say is that we do absolutely everything we can to solve this, from management, the whole company, the board, and we come back as soon as we have anything more we can share with everyone. We know it's a concern. And then we have said in a number of reports and AGM notices that we are not aware about any material financial changes to what we presented in 2022, and that is still the case. We have, however, there are a few smaller items that may affect 2022, so we are here disclosing a couple of potential adjustments to 2022. The total effect of this, maximum effect of this, is £1.4 million, and the cash effect is maximum £600,000 in kind of future potential cash effects. There are a number of mitigating factors that can occur, but we haven't put them in. For example, that we collected cash, and do you have to give it back to an administrator or not? So just to go through them quickly, it's a potential write-down of £600,000 of sales invoices related to this customer or our subsidiaries who is in insolvency. And technically, all of that 600,000 could be a future cash effect, although there are a number of factors here, potential recoveries that we haven't included in this number. And then we have, again, because of the same insolvency, when we acquired Audiensely, as part of the purchase price allocation, you assign a value to the existing customer relationships. And this particular customer had a value of £500,000. And dependent on if it's coming out of insolvency as a going concern or not, we may have to adjust that value. I can also note that the administrator already ordered 2 campaigns from Audiensely while in the administration, so there is a chance that they may continue. There is no cash effect of this. This is accounting presentation, you can call it. And then there is extra audit fees of £200,000 paid in this quarter, and which we are likely to then to book back into 2021, as that is a custom. And on top of that, we have acquired this little company, LightUp, and we booked that when we had 10% share of the company as a financial asset, but under our current accounting standards, we need to change it to an investment in an associate. And it's all about how much financial control we have over the company according to the definitions in our accounting standards. And if we would take it up as an associate, we would need to book our share of the losses of that company into our 2022 P&L, and that would amount to £100,000, so it's a very small amount. But there is no cash effect of this. This is how you present numbers. And finally, we can't settle effectively the earnout for 2022 with the sellers from Audiensely yet, because we need audited accounts. And dependent on how we estimate that going forward, which is the last thing we will do of all of this, we may have to do an adjustment to a contingent consideration liability on our balance sheet, which may adjust the P&L of 2022. That in itself had no cash effect, and earn-out, of course, has. So there are a few things. Total, I kind of booking P&L effect, 1.4 million pounds, but a maximum 600,000 pound cash effect, probably smaller, to be honest. So that is all I have. So back to you, Jens. Thank you.
Thanks so much for the presentation here. I think we'll get to the questions right ahead. You have launched a limited number of games this year. Why are you not signing more games?
Yeah, so what I said before is that we kind of slightly changed our focus in the type of games we're signing. It's as with all markets, it's 80-20 rule applies, where 20% of the games represent 80% of the revenue. So our focus used to be slightly bigger market with the top thousands, where we're now looking more at the top segment of the market. And of course, that means that it's taking slightly longer to sign these games, but they also have a much more meaningful contribution. So, signing the top game in the market, which we've done this year with Monopoly Go and also Stumble Guys, those deals take time, right? And it becomes easier and easier once you have these deals in the portfolio to sign more games. So I'm hoping for next year that we'll be able to use these strong references we now have to increase the speed of signing new games.
You're mentioning Monopoly Go here, and it's breaking all sorts of records. How is the game performing on the Flexion platforms?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great to see really how well this game has performed overall, and I don't really want to go into the financials of how the game is performing. It is performing well as to be expected. The one thing that I would say is that it's working well on pretty much all our platforms, which is, of course, helps. Sometimes you launch a game and it's working well in one market or one of our distribution channels and not in all. But when a game works well in all channels, it can be really successful for us. So that has been a very, very positive effect of launching this title. But I think the more important long-term aspect of launching the number one game in the market is that we are seen by the top publishers as a player that, why are we not talking to these guys if Monopoly is using Flexion, why we should be talking to them. So we're starting to see traction from the big developers in a slightly different way after having launched this game.
You're currently working with Android games only. What do you think about the chance of Apple opening up its platform for the third-party stores?
Well, this is something we've been waiting for a long time, and I often get asked that question, so I'm used to that. And I'm not going to guess too much about it in the short term. I think eventually all platforms that are de facto monopolies will have to open up, and I think even Apple have realized that that's going to happen sooner or later. So I know some of our partners are already working on and preparing third-party stores for iOS, and it's going to happen. But we're not jumping the gun here and diving deep into that straight away. We wait and see, and when we finally have some new stores available on Apple, we'll be ready.
Bill Stone, the CEO of Digital Turbine, mentioned in their earnings call that they're expanding their partnership with Flexion. What does that mean for the company?
Again, on the sourcing side, if we talk a little bit more about that, Digital Turbine, they work with pretty much every top game developer in the market, and they're distributing their Google Play versions normally through an advertising model. As I said in the presentation, they have a footprint of more than 800 million devices where their software is installed. And what they're doing now is that the first steps into the alternative distribution market was to take a big investment in a company that we're already working with, a company called Aptoid that runs app stores for distribution partners. So Digital Turbine took a stake. They increased that stake to 20%. So we see where this is going. They've taken the first step with that, and now they realize that they need games for their platform. So they're rolling out app stores with the US carriers. They're already live with 5 carriers in the US, which is pretty amazing given that they've only been doing it for less than a year. And they're also approaching the European market and riding on the changes thanks to the Digital Markets Act. So all the carriers in the European market are now looking at how they can take a position and take some of that distribution away from Google and Apple. And we're playing a very important role in that, because it's not easy for a new player to attract game developers to their platform. It needs work, and hopefully it will return profit thanks to the efforts we're putting in. So very positive about this, but it's still early days, and we'll have to look at it more next year when we really have an exciting roadmap together.
Thanks so much for answering our questions here, Jens, and good luck going forward.
Thank you so much.